Hello and welcome. My name is Ivy Natalia Jaihon, and I will present the two theories and their approaches to learning within the classroom. Before that, let me introduce our three main characters or theories. That is cognitive theory, behaviorist theory, and lastly the humanistic theory. Each of these theories had their own unique set of definitions, principles, and approaches when it comes to teaching or learning. I believe through presenting these theories, it helps the students, such as me, to be able to understand more on why these topics are important for how we. Cognitive theory had provided many key principles, with each had their own explanatory value for education, such as, firstly, schemata or schema. Schemata is an idea that people organize their knowledge into mental structure, or what is called schemas. Schemas act as the framework to help learners interpret new information slowly. Through building on the new information. This helps learners to build mental models that help them understand the connection among ideas and outcome. Second principle is active learning and meaning making. Within cognitive theory, the learners not only take information within the memory, they also try to interpret the information that they receive. Such procedures that they took will be connecting the new concept with existing knowledge, analyze information, and constructing the meaning through the experiences that they had. This active engagement makes the process of learning easier among the learners. And lastly is meta-cognition. This principle involves the learner reflecting on what they learn, acknowledging that their knowledge gaps, and adjusting the technique to improve their understanding. This encourages the learners to continuously develop their recent knowledge or skill while trying to adapt themselves to newer challenges. Let's introduce our major theory of cognitive theories, that is Jean Piaget. He is widely known for his perspective of cognitive development, that is, the cognitive stage theory, and had created and studied an account on how children and youth are gradually able to think logically and scientifically. Piaget was a psychological constructivist in his views that learning procedure is broken into two types of path, that is, one, assimilation, and second is accommodation. Firstly, the assumption is internal mental processes, in which cognitive psychologists suggested that people need to use their senses to collect information from the outside world. Answer. Second, a core assumption in cognitive theory is computer analogy, in which cognitive psychologists suggested that the human mind works in a similar way to a computer. As of core assumption of cognitive theory is the level of processing. In this assumption, the process that was taken breaks into three stages, which is encoding, storage, and retrieval. How does this approach affect in real classes, or approach, meaning the cognitive theory? Well, if we follow the Piaget model of development in cognitive theory within the real environment, such as the classroom, the best example will be when a teacher is teaching the students about scientific subjects. Example, a teacher who is teaching a classroom within the Form 1 classes. She is showing the students on the science of which specific items that are more likely to float or more likely to sink. in which the students start to observe, deducting, and making hypotheses. One strength when it comes to cognitive theory when applied to learners are how it has many practical applications. As according to a research article, it stated how cognitive theory helps in determining the supposed learners whether they had autism or not. However, there are still challenges that the researchers place within this theory, which is, as according to a research that were found on how the researcher John Piaget has neglected the cultural, educational, and social effect on the cognitive development of the learners. The main principle of key of behaviorist theory is role of environment, in which environment can contribute to the way you behave in the form of feedback, structure systems, and how it can shape your habits within the classroom. The second is the stimulus response or SR mechanism. This mechanism is built based on the idea how every behavior is triggered by certain situation within the environment. On to the last principle, which is reinforcement and punishment. Let's focus on reinforcement. Focus on repetition, that is to ensure that the students repeat certain behavioral patterns, become part of them permanently, while in punishment covers what reduce or completely erase the original and repeated behaviors. Is John B. Watson. Well, he is a pioneer of psychologists who revolutionized psychology in the early 20th century by introducing behaviorism. It's a scientific approach that focuses on observable behaviors instead of internal thoughts. John was remembered for his research on the conditioning process and how he challenged the existing views while also laying the groundwork for future research in the field of behavioral psychology. Blank slates. Blank states, or in which, when an individuals are born, they will be born with the mind of tabula rasa, and tabula rasa can be defined as a blank slate. As the individual within the baby stage are not acquired with the ability to think or how their emotion or feelings had no influence on their behaviors. On to the second core assumption is behavior learned through conditioning. This conditioning happened to be classical and operant conditioning. And the last assumption of behaviorist theory is how humans and animals learn in similar way. It leads to certain findings of how researchers took the animal studies and apply it to predict and make generalizations about the human behaviors. Behaviorist theory can be applied within the classroom in a realistic situation while we teaches the approach of token economy. This approach helps in giving students who exhibit good behavior, whether it is following the teacher's order, not causing fight between their fellow peers, and being able to understand what has been taught in today's classroom. This token can be exchanged for rewards, providing the students with material rewards in order to stay on task. Such a best example will be in a year 1 mathematics lesson. Students who are able to understand the mathematical techniques that were taught and apply this knowledge into their exams, the students who had the best mark will be given the tokens in exchange to also get their awards. The one strength of behaviorist theory is how it highlighted language acquisitions. Language acquisitions can define as the process by which humans acquire the ability to comprehend and produce language either as their first or second or more of their language. Behaviorist theory has limitation to its approach that can be observed, described, and measured, and that is physical behavior. The environment acts as a stimulus to the learners, which result in a physical response. Therefore, the external environment can determine learning and not the learners themselves. Now, we will be focusing on the key principle of humanistic theory. In order to understand each key principle within the humanistic theory, we need to be aware about this theory in psychology and how it centers around the procedure of an individual personal development and the idea of self-realizations. And the first of principle of humanistic theory is free will and personal choice. This principle states how people possess free will. The behavior of an individual is not determined by their past experiences or environment, in which case, a student who chooses on how they act and respond to certain situations are shown to promote individual responsibility. The second is self-actualizations. When an individual reaches a self-fulfillment, can be understood as becoming their very own best version. This process exceeds educational performance, concern for personal happiness, and the self-actualizations of the individual's potential. The third is the holistic view of individuals. This principle deals with the holistic understanding of students as a personality that involves various characteristics such as emotions. Abraham Maslow. Maslow was an American psychologist who is the best known for proposing the hierarchy of human needs in motivating behavior. Maslow described the pattern through which human motivation is generally moved, or in other words, in order for motivation to happen at the next level, each level must be fulfilled within the individual themselves. Now, I'll be focusing on the core assumptions of humanistic theory. The first core assumption is how human nature is intrinsically good. Psychologists believe that people are naturally inclined towards growth and goodness. This contrasts with theories where views of human nature are fundamentally flawed or just driven by primal instincts. The second is people have the drive of self-actualizations. In this second core assumptions, it is a process of how realizing that an individual had the potential of becoming a better version. As students in poetry classes who experiencing the feeling of disillusions on which type of academic classes that they wish to continue while also feeling discouraged. In such situations, a teacher begins asking their students to write a private essay about their feelings, and if they wish to, share it with their fellow peers. While at first certain students might not feel comfortable, however, slowly, some of these students starts to speak up with the encouragement of their teacher, share what they reflect from the situation, their feelings, and how they wish that their fellow peers will not feel discouraged for the future. Through this, one clear strength of this theory, that is the human potentialities, in which humanistic theory allows learners to visualize their potential as an individual with potential to develop. Through recognizing the capacity for growth, self-realizations, and the search for meaning in what their learners went through, it provides them the approach of optimism and hope for their potential future development. One clear vision, that is organizations of knowledge among the learners. The humanistic theory states that the knowledge must be organized by the individual. However, in the lens of traditional educational practice, the knowledge is organized by learners themselves. The participations of learners in the organizations and planning of knowledge and other aspects can be limited if the individual lacks the confidence or being discouraged in their potential abilities. With that, I will now conclude this presentation. Through my whole journey of researching and understanding how these theories had offer and how valuable they are, and the perspective that they show when it comes to how learning acquires and how teaching can be effectively handled when in the classroom environment. Each approach, and by breaking down each of the meanings and how we can apply it within the real life classroom environment.